The night it happened, I was dead asleep. The kind of sleep you only fall into after a week of too many bills and not enough quiet. Our bedroom was dark except for that little blue glow from my husband's phone on his nightstand. At first I thought I was dreaming when I heard it buzz. Then it buzzed again and again. I squinted at the clock. 3:02 a.m. My heart did that little stutter it always does when a phone rings at a stupid hour, because 3 a.m. calls are never good news. Somebody's sick, somebody's in trouble, somebody's gone. I rolled over expecting him to wake up and grab it, but he was on his back, out cold, snoring soft, one arm thrown over his head like he didn't have a care in the world. The screen lit up the side of his face every time the phone vibrated, an unknown number flashing over and over, no name. That was the first little twist in my stomach. Have you ever looked at your partner's phone ringing in the middle of the night and felt that invisible hand squeeze your chest, fear and suspicion all tangled together? I told myself it could be work, it could be family. But then I remembered his mother never calls that late, and his job has an emergency line, not his personal cell. The buzzing wouldn't stop. Finally, before it woke him up, I reached over him, grabbed the phone, and hit accept. "Hello?" I whispered, voice thick with sleep. For a second, all I heard was breathing, then a woman's voice, clear, awake, and sharp enough to slice through the dark. "Put my husband on the phone." I sat up like someone had poured ice water down my back. "Excuse me?" I said, thinking I must have misheard. Maybe she said, "my cousin, my brother," anything but what I knew I'd heard. "I know he's there," she repeated, slower this time, like she was tasting every word. "Put my husband on the phone." My eyes slid from the glowing screen to the man sleeping next to me. Same number she'd called was staring up at me on his phone. Same man snoring like a baby 2 inches away from my hand. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice suddenly very awake. She gave his full name, first, middle, last, the name I'd taken when I married him. "We both know whose phone this is. You must be the friend he's been staying with." Friend. Have you ever had one sentence hit you so hard you feel dizzy? I stared at our wedding photo on the dresser, the two of us beaming in white and black, his hand on my waist like I belonged to him. I stared at his ring glinting in his finger in the dark. "I'm his wife," I heard myself say. "Who are you?" There was a pause on her end, the kind where you can hear a life rearranging itself. Then she laughed, not like something was funny, but like something had finally snapped. "That's interesting," she said, "because I'm his wife too." In that moment, with my husband snoring beside me and another woman on the line claiming the same man, my whole world shifted on its axis. Have you ever thought you knew exactly who you were, wife, partner, Mrs. So-and-so, only to realize at 3 in the morning you might have been living as someone's part-time fantasy instead of their only reality? I didn't shake him awake, not yet. I ended the call with my hand trembling, set the phone back down like it might burn me, and lay there in the dark wide awake, listening to his even breathing and hearing her words echo in my head. "Put my husband on the phone." That call didn't just wake me up at 3 a.m. It woke me up from a marriage I didn't know I was only half in. People like to look at stories like mine and say there must have been signs, as if catching a late-night call from another woman would be simple if you just paid enough attention, as if betrayal shows up with a flashing neon arrow above it. Maybe there were signs. But before you judge what I missed at 3 a.m., you have to understand everything that came before it. because I didn't walk into that moment as a blank slate. I walked in as my mother's daughter. I watched my mother fall apart over a phone bill when I was 10 years old. I remember her sitting at our chipped kitchen table with that long sheet of itemized calls, hand over her mouth, eyes filling as she traced her finger down all the late-night numbers my father had sworn didn't mean anything. I remember their fight that followed, her screaming, him denying, then turning it back on her. If you weren't so paranoid, I wouldn't have to lie. 2 weeks later, he left to clear his head and never really came back. I promised myself I would never be that woman, the one who sits there trying to decode strangers' area codes like they're hieroglyphs for the truth. I threw myself into school, then work, deciding early that if I was going to build a life, it wouldn't be on someone else's paycheck or promises. By my late 20s, I had what people like to call my own apartment, my own car, my own name on every bill. I also had a chorus in my ear, aunties asking why I was still single, co-workers joking that with my standards, I'd die alone with cats I didn't even like. You can't compare every man to your father. Not all of them are like that, my friends would say. Some part of me knew they were right, but another part heard a different message. If you don't lower your guard, you'll never have more than your little one bedroom in your career. Then I met him. It wasn't lightning bolts or violins, nothing dramatic. He was just easy. We bumped into each other at a networking event. He made a corny joke about the cheap wine. I laughed harder than it deserved. And by the end of the night, we'd found a quiet corner and were talking like we'd known each other longer than an hour. He listened, or at least he looked like he was listening, eyes locked on mine, asking follow-up questions about my job, my mom, my love of old R&B. He didn't flinch when I mentioned I'd grown up without a father at home. Then your mom must be a powerhouse, he said. I love strong women. Do you know how intoxicating that sounds when you spent your whole life being told you're too independent, too opinionated, too much? He worked in tech, had a steady job, a nice car, but not flashy. He talked about saving for a house, about wanting kids someday, but not in a rush, about tiredness with games and situationships. On paper, he was the opposite of my father. Present, responsible, verbally very anti-cheating. I saw what it did to my mom, he said once over dinner, shaking his head. I would never do that to someone. I remember thinking, we're the same. We know that kind of hurt. We'd never risk it. When he pursued me, he did it openly. Text in the morning, calls on his lunch break, flowers delivered to my job just because. He asked my mom to meet for coffee after a few months, came to Easter dinner, got grilled by my aunties, and passed every test. They liked that he prayed before eating, that he talked about retirement funds, that he didn't flinch at the words therapy or communication. For the first time in my adult life, the chorus in my ear changed from "you're too picky" to "don't mess this one up." Early on, there were things I now recognize as yellow lights. Not quite red flags, but warnings I edited in real time. He traveled a lot for work, always some conference or client visit out of town. At first, I admired it. He's ambitious, I told my friends. He's going places. When he didn't pick up on the first ring during trips, he'd call back later with a sigh about long meetings, bad hotel Wi-Fi, late dinners. You know I'm not a phone person, he'd say, but you're always on my mind. He made a point to send pictures. Him in hotel lobbies, him at airport gates, random city skylines. Proof, I thought. Men who cheat don't document their lives like that, right? He asked me to move in with him after a year. I hesitated. My apartment lease, my mother, my whole life was in one city, his job and condo in another. "You've done everything alone for so long," he said gently. "Let me take care of you for once. We can still visit your mom. It doesn't have to be you against the world." The little girl that watched her mother drown under unpaid bills and unwashed dishes while a man locked himself in another room heard that and ached. I talked to my mom. She said, "Don't push him away because you're scared. Not every man is your daddy. You deserve some ease." So I did it. I packed up my apartment and moved into his sleek, modern condo with the marble countertops and stainless steel everything. A place that looked like the opposite of our old house, with its sticky counters and mismatched chairs. At first, it felt like a reward. We coordinated our morning routines, made dinner together, watched shows curled up on a couch that cost more than my first car. He was affectionate, made sure we took little weekend trips, introduced me to his friends as my girl, then my fiancé when he proposed under twinkly lights with his coworker filming on a phone. The proposal video went up on his social media and got 100 comments about black love and finally. We got married in a small ceremony. My family came, his too. His mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for making my son so happy." I believed her. There were red flags, even then, tucked among the bouquets. He was weird about money. At first, I loved that he insisted on paying the big things. He'd say, "You keep your money as backup. I got us." But when I suggested opening a joint account for bills, he dodged. "It's easier if I just handle it," he said, "less to keep track of." He was careful with his phone, always face down, always in his hand when he left the room. The one time I joked, "Who you hiding from?" he laughed and kissed my forehead. "Please, I'm too old for that. The only thing I'm hiding is how much Candy Crush I play," said, turning the screen to show a game. My gut fluttered, but the image in front of me said, "You're being paranoid." There were also the work trips. They stretched a bit after we married, from 2 days to 4, from once a month to twice. I'd kiss him goodbye at the door, straighten his tie, and feel proud that I was the wife a man hustled for. He'd text photos from different cities, call every night. Sometimes his calls were short, rushed. "Babe, I'm with the team. I'll call longer tomorrow," he'd say. "Don't go to bed mad at me." I told myself I wasn't going to be like my mother sitting up all night tracing numbers. I wasn't going to snoop. I wasn't going to live in suspicion. If I couldn't trust him, what was the point? That was the story I repeated to myself every time a little inconsistency popped up. Like the time he said he was in Chicago, but a mutual friend's Instagram story tagged him at an airport in another state. "Layover," he explained smoothly when I asked, annoyed I was checking up on him through other people's posts. Or the time he came home smelling like a different detergent than the hotel brand he always complained about. "They switched brands. Thank God," he said with that same easy smile. It was all so plausible, so small on their own. And in between the weirdness, there were the good things. The way he brought my mom her favorite pie when we visited. The way he surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays. The way he held me when I cried about work stress and said, "We're a team. I'm not going anywhere." So I quieted the voice that said something is off and turned up the volume on "Don't sabotage a good thing because of your issues."
I almost convinced myself until that phone rang at 3 a.m. and a stranger on the other end said, "Put my husband on the phone."
The rest of that night, I lay there next to him with my eyes wide open, listening to his breathing and hearing her words on a loop. I'm his wife, too. Every time he snored, felt like an insult. How was he sleeping so peacefully while two women with the same claim on him were staring at their ceilings in different beds? By the time the sun came up, my heart felt like it had run a marathon while my body hadn't moved an inch. I got up before he did, went through the motions, coffee, shower, my robe tied a little too tight. When he shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, he looked like every other morning, hair sticking up, asking, "You make coffee?" Like the world was still the same. "Your phone was blowing up last night," I said casually, watching his face. "You didn't hear it?" He blinked, hand halfway to his mug. "Nah," he said, "must have been spam." He didn't even ask who it was, didn't check the call log, just shrugged off the idea that a woman's voice at 3 a.m. demanding her husband could be anything but a wrong number. That told me everything and nothing at the same time. Part of me wanted to slap the phone down in front of him and scream, "Call her back, coward." Another part of me remembered my mother at that old kitchen table begging for explanations and getting more lies instead. I didn't want a performance. I wanted the truth. And something in me knew I wasn't going to get it from him voluntarily. So I said nothing for that moment. I went to work with my stomach in knots, his phone number and hers saved in my own now, thumb itching all morning. I stared at spreadsheets and saw that message instead. "Put my husband on the phone." She hadn't sounded confused when she said it. She sounded tired. Tired in a way I recognized. Around lunchtime, when the office was quiet and he texted me some bland, "Day's crazy, talk later" message, I gave in and dialed her number from my cell. It didn't even ring twice. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. No hello, no who is this, just straight to it. I swallowed. "Last night, who did you think you were talking to?" I asked. "The woman he rents from? The cousin he's staying with? Or did he bother to tell you I exist at all?" She let out a humorless little laugh. "He told me you were his friend from work, letting him crash while he sorted some things out. Said you were going through a divorce and needed a male perspective." My jaw clenched. That was creative. "Interesting," I said, "because he told me you were his unstable ex, the one who can't accept it's over." I could almost hear her roll her eyes. "Of course he did," she muttered. "That's his favorite story." For a second, we both went quiet, each of us feeling the ground shift under our own narratives. Then she said, "How long have you been married?" I gave her the year. She gave me hers. The dates overlapped like a bad magic trick, the kind where the rabbit was never really in just one hat. We were together way before that," she added, voice wobbling for the first time. "College, then off and on, then back on. The marriage just made it official." Off and on, back on. The words tasted like ash. That was when it really hit me. I hadn't just been cheated on. I might have been slotted into an existing life like a piece of furniture. He proposed to me 3 years ago, I said slowly. Got down on one knee in front of all our friends. His mother cried. He told his mother we were working things out after a rough patch, that he needed space, but that we were still his first priority. My jaw clenched. That was creative. Interesting. Have you ever realized in real time that the man you thought you knew has been copy-pasting his love story from one woman to another, changing little details but keeping the same script? The main conflict grew teeth right there on that phone call, not just between me and him, but between the story I'd built my life on and the one that was actually true. He's never home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I said, a little test. Work travel. He's at the gym those nights, staying late to clear his head, she replied without missing a beat. We compared more. Holidays, business trips, the time he claimed to be stuck in an airport with no signal when my aunt died, and I couldn't reach him. Turned out that was the same weekend he'd taken her away for a surprise anniversary getaway. My grief on one side of town, her joy on the other, his comfort at the center. The more we talked, the less angry I felt at her, and the more furious I felt at him, and at the part of me that had wanted so badly to believe I'd finally dodged my father's shadow that I'd ignored my own intuition. So what now, she asked eventually, her voice small in a way it wouldn't been when she was demanding her husband in the dock. Because I'm not gonna lie, last night I thought I was going crazy. Like maybe he did have some innocent explanation. But hearing you, seeing our dates, I'm not crazy, right? No, I said, you're not crazy. He just built 2 houses on one foundation and hoped neither one of us would notice the cracks. Inside, the conflict was ripping me up. On one hand, I wanted to slam his stuff in the trash bags, throw his ring at his head, and call every woman he'd ever known. On the other, I remembered my mother warning me, don't let a man who lied on you turn you into someone you don't recognize. Part of me wanted to handle it quietly, with lawyers and papers and cold distance. Another part wanted to stand in the middle of his job, his church, his barbershop, and say, here are his 2 wives, any questions? And then there was the most painful layer, grief. Because for all his lies, there had been real moments, real laughter, real comfort. I couldn't just swap him out for a villain and be done. The conflict wasn't just, he hurt me, so I'll hurt him. It was, he lied to me, to us, to himself. And now I have to decide whether I'm going to spend the next year of my life letting this define me or taking my life back from the fire. On top of that was the quiet war between me and her. We could have easily turned on each other. I could have said, you knew about me and took him anyway. She could have said, you the one who married someone who was already taken. That's what he was counting on. Men like that thrive on women clawing each other while they slip out the side door. But the longer we talked, the more our anger lined up side by side instead of facing each other. Has he ever hit you? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. I hated I had to ask, but I needed to know what kind of danger we were in. No, she said, nothing like that. Yells, gaslights, disappears, but never that. Same, I said, feeling both relieved and somehow more offended. He'd hurt us in the one way my mother feared most, and yet never raised a hand. The war he fought was with lies, not fists. When I hung up that day, the main conflict was clear. I wasn't battling just a cheating husband. I was battling a carefully curated image he'd built in 2 cities, a web of half-truths and convenient absences. The part of me that wanted to curl up and pretend I hadn't answered that 3 a.m. call, and a lifetime of being told women like me should be grateful when a good man picks us. Now I had to choose, live with the knowledge and do nothing, or step into a fight I didn't ask for but couldn't walk away from without losing myself.
There's a moment when you find out you're sharing a husband where the easiest thing in the world would be to hate the other woman more than the man who lied to both of y'all. It gives your pain a neat target. It lets you say, if she hadn't, instead of, if I had listened. I stood at that crossroads the week after the 3 a.m. call, phone in my hand, her number at the top of my recents, and I had to decide which way I was going to turn. Was I going to be my father's wife or my mother's daughter all over again, fighting another woman for a man who didn't deserve either of us? Or was I going to be someone new? On the 3rd day of not sleeping, I texted her, "We should meet in public. No drama, just truth." She replied almost immediately, "Name the place." We picked a cafe halfway between where he said he worked and where he said he stayed for work. A neutral little spot with bad art on the walls and strong coffee. I got there early, hands shaking so much I nearly spilled sugar everywhere. I kept wondering what she looked like, what kind of woman had shared my life without knowing it. When she walked in, my first irrational thought was, of course she's pretty. The kind of pretty people notice when you walk into a room. Deep brown skin, twists pulled back, tired eyes that still had some fight left in them. She spotted me instantly. We sent each other photos for proof. And for a second, we just stared. Two strangers with the same ghost between us. "So," she said, sliding into the chair across from me, "so which one of us is Mrs.?" I almost laughed because it was either that or cry. "Legally, me," I said, sliding my marriage certificate across the table. Emotionally, apparently we've been on a group plan. She pulled out her own folder, photos, texts, a lease with both their names on it, not as husband and wife, but as long-term partners who'd built a life before he ever met me. Somewhere in there, the narrative shifted again. I wasn't the main character in this mess. I was a sequel he'd written without canceling the original show. We compared dates, weddings, moves, trips. The turning point snapped into place when we both realized there was no way to arrange it neatly into first and second, real and side. He'd been overlapping, phasing in and out, slipping rings on and off, depending on the day of the week. He told me he went to therapy after his last relationship because he never wanted to hurt anyone like that again, I said bitterly. He told me he learned his lesson about lying. She gave a short, sharp laugh. He told me he went to therapy because I had trust issues. Said I saw problems where there weren't any because of my parents' divorce. Have you ever listened to someone describe the exact same conversation you had with the same man, just cut and pasted over a different fear? That's when my anger at her, the little bit that was left, burned off for good. She wasn't my enemy. We'd both been speaking lines from his script. He's going to try to spin us against each other. Tell you I knew about you. Tell me you knew about me. That's how this works. If we're busy fighting each other, he never has to answer for anything. Exactly, she said. So we don't give him that option. She leaned in. We act like grown women instead of props in his play. That was the real turning point for me. Choosing to see her as an ally instead of a rival. We talked about what we each wanted. She had kids to think about. I didn't. Her stakes were different, higher in some ways. I don't want my babies growing up thinking this is normal. I don't want my daughter watching me stay and my son watching him juggle women like it's cute. I thought about my mother at that table, about little me staring at the phone bill. I'm not going to be the woman who stays because she's scared of rent. I can rebuild my life. I've done it before. But I'm not leaving him to just slide quietly into somebody else's DMs with no one the wiser. So what do we hit him with? His heart? His wallet? His name? All three if we smart. We agreed on one non-negotiable. No matter how angry we were not going to sink to his level. No lies, no accidents that would make us look unstable. Everything we did had to be rooted in truth, and if possible, paperwork. That same week, I booked a consultation with a family lawyer and told her I'd bring my spouse and a long-term partner to the next meeting. The lawyer's eyebrows shot up when we arrived together, but she listened. We laid it out. My legal marriage, her common law length relationship depending on state law, the overlapping dates, the text messages where he promised each of us the same future. I'll be honest, the lawyer said. Bigamy is hard to prove and pursue in some places, and sometimes the DA doesn't want to bother unless there's something else attached. But what you two have here is enough for at least one annulment based on fraud, maybe two, and some serious leverage in property and custody negotiations. Leverage. It was the first time since that 3 a.m. call I felt like I had anything but hurt in my hand. You can go at him separately, she said, but that gives him room to tell two different stories. If you confront him together with the evidence and make it clear you're coordinating, he's got a lot less room to wriggle. After that, the main conflict stopped being me versus him in the dark and started being us versus his lies in the light. We started gathering quietly, printing bank statements that showed duplicate rent or hotel charges, saving screenshots of his location tags that didn't match his excuses, pulling photos from our phones where he was wearing his wedding ring on different hands, or not at all depending on which life he was inhabiting that day. She dug up old texts where he said to her, "I'm not ready for marriage. It's just a piece of paper," weeks before he proposed to me. I forwarded emails where he told me, "You're my first and only wife," while he was still posting anniversary pics with her on his private Facebook. The turning point wasn't just deciding to meet. It was realizing we had more power together than we ever had alone. That made his own set of fears pop up. What if he gets violent? She asked one night on the phone. He's never put his hands on me, but I've seen him punch walls. We pick a public place. We don't go alone. And before we even meet, we give copies of everything to someone we trust. My brother, your cousin, the lawyer, so that even if he tries to throw a tantrum, the information doesn't disappear with us. In the days leading up to it, every interaction with him felt surreal. He kissed my forehead, asked about my day, complained about traffic, all while I knew that in another zip code, he was doing the same with her, or making excuses for why he couldn't get away. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and thought, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't be this calm? The last straw came on a Saturday morning when he walked into the kitchen, phone in hand, smiling. I was thinking we should do a vow renewal in a couple of years. Big party, all our friends, really celebrate us. For a second, bow rose in my throat. Celebrate us? Which us? Me and him? Her and him? Or the fantasy version in his head where the world kept spinning around his lies? That's when I knew I didn't just want out. I wanted closure. Not the kind where you cry in your shower and move on quietly, but the kind where he has to look both of us in the eye and see the damage side by side. Are you free Friday night? I asked, forcing my voice to stay light. I want us to go out, just the two of us. He grinned. Look at my wife being romantic, he said, tapping my nose. Yeah, I can make that work. Across town, she sent a similar message. Dinner Friday? I made a reservation. Don't be late. We picked the same restaurant, different names on the bookings, same time. We requested a corner table where 3 people could sit, not 2. That was our turning point embodied. We stopped waiting for him to choose one of us and chose ourselves instead. Now, all that was left was to see what he would do when the two halves of his double life finally sat across from him at the same table. Friday night, I got to the restaurant early. I chose the table myself, a corner booth with a full view of the entrance, just like we'd planned. The host looked confused when I said, "We'll be 3, but didn't question it. I ordered water and tried to keep my hands from shaking against the glass. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped. Have you ever sat waiting for a bomb you set yourself to go off, wondering if you're more scared of the explosion or of it being a dud? She came in first, right on time. Simple dress, hair pulled back, that same tired alertness in her eyes. When the host started to lead her to a different table, I stood up and waved. For a moment, we both laughed. The absurdity of it. 2 women who should have never needed to share anything, but maybe a recipe book, now sharing this moment. We sat side by side instead of across from each other. A deliberate choice. No divide between us, just one single front. We'd rehearsed what we'd say a dozen times, how we'd handle it if he tried to storm out, if he tried to turn it into a scene. None of that fully prepares you for the moment you actually see him walk in. He strolled through those doors like any other Friday. Button-down shirt, that cologne I'd once loved, scanning the room with a smile that had fooled both of us. He saw me first. His face lit up. Then his gaze snagged on the woman sitting next to me. I watched it happen in slow motion. The way his smile froze, then faltered. The way his eyes flicked between us like a man seeing double for the first time. For a second, I swear I saw calculation in his eyes, options flipping through his head like cards. Pretend it's a coincidence. Walk out. Get angry. Play dumb. In the end, he settled on a brittle grin. "Well," he said, sliding into the seat opposite us like this was just some awkward surprise party. "Didn't know this was gonna be a family affair." His hands were a little too tight around the menu. "Sit down," I said. It came out calmer than I felt. He gave that little laugh he uses when he wants to act like he's in on the joke. "Ladies," he said, leaning back, "I feel like I'm about to be the guest of honor on an episode of some messy talk show." "You could say that," she replied, her voice steady, "except this one doesn't have commercial breaks." He tried to meet her eyes, then mine, and found no softness to land on. "So," he said, dropping the menu, "which one of you wants to tell me why you brought my unstable ex and my wife to the same table?" It was almost impressive how quickly he reached for that script. "That's interesting," I said, pulling the folder out of my bag. I slid a piece of paper across the table. A printout of a screenshot where he texted me, "She's just my crazy baby mama. It was over years ago. I'm only dealing with her for the kids." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't say anything yet. "Or this," she added, pulling out her own printout, placing it next to mine. A text to her from months earlier. "She's just a friend from work, letting me crash. She's going through a divorce. I'm helping her out. You know you're my one and only." He glanced down, eyes skimming both pages. "You two have been busy," he said lightly, tapping the stack with one finger, printing out texts like high schoolers.
We've had time, I said. You do a lot of traveling. What do you expect? He shot back. I work. I hustle. I provide. Sorry I'm not home watching Lifetime all day. There it was, the deflection, the attempt to turn this into a conversation about our supposed pettiness instead of his lies. We're not here to talk about your work ethic, she said. We're here because at 3 a.m. the other night, I called my husband and another woman answered. And then that woman called me back. I leaned forward. We compared calendars, I said. Holidays, anniversaries, trips. You've been living 2 lives, at least 2, depending on what you've told the next one. A flicker of true fear crossed his face at the word next. He opened his mouth to deny, then shut it again when she pulled out her phone and hit play. His own voice filled the little booth, tinny but clear. You know I'm not that kind of guy, recording him said. Marriage is just a piece of paper anyway. We're different. You're my real family. He went pale. That had been months before he proposed to me. You recorded me? He snapped at her. You really on that level? Funny, she said coolly. I never had a problem when I recorded our kids' birthdays. Guess I should have turned the camera around more often. He looked at me. And you? He said. You're really teaming up with her after everything I do for you? What you do for me? I repeated, my anger finally warming my cheeks. Like disappeared 2 nights a week for work trips that turned out to be weekends at her place? Like promise me you was my first and only wife while posting anniversary shout-outs to her on your private Facebook? His mouth opened and closed. I never said. I did, I cut in, sliding another photo across the table. It was a screenshot of his profile, him and her, grinning. The caption, 7 years strong, stamped with last year's date. I forgot you're not blocked on your mother's page, I added. She loves to share. This was the part of the climax you never see in movies. The silence. The way embarrassment creeps up a man's neck when he realizes he miscalculated his audience. We weren't yelling or throwing drinks. We were presenting exhibits. Look, he said finally, spreading his hands like a peacemaker. Relationships are messy. Things overlap. We were on a break. I was trying to figure out my heart. You both benefit from me. I've taken care of. Don't you dare try to make this sound like you're some overworked martyr, she snapped, the first crack in her composure. You didn't overlap. You lied. You told me I wasn't ready for marriage while you were shopping for rings with her. You told her I was some bitter ex while you were still sleeping in my bed. He leaned forward, anger flaring. Now the charm had failed. You think some little papers and screenshots change anything? He hissed. Nobody's gonna care. People cheat all the time. You're no special. Cheating and begimic are not the same thing, I said quietly. The word hung there between us. It had an ugly weight. Begimic, he repeated, laughing like we'd told him we'd accused him of murder. You don't even know what that means. The lawyer does, I said, gesturing with my chin. He glanced over his shoulder and I saw the exact moment he realized we weren't the only ones at that restaurant for him. At the bar, my brother sat nursing a soda, eyes locked on us. At a nearby table, her cousin flipped through a menu she wasn't really reading. If he tried to make a scene, there were witnesses who already knew the story.
We met with her, I went on. Turns out, registering a marriage in one county and claiming to be separated without any paperwork while you build a life with someone else in another looks real messy if anyone ever decides to take it seriously. His eyes darted around, calculating again. You're not going to the police, he said, more a question than a statement. We don't have to, she said. Not yet. What we are going to do is stop letting you live off of both of us like some emotional landlord collecting 2 rents. And we want you to feel just once what it's like when the lies you tell catch up. When 2 women you thought would never speak sit across from you and say, "We know." His shoulders slumped then, the fight draining out of him, replaced with something uglier, self-pity. You're cruel, he muttered, both of you, after everything I've done. I used to think my father was the cruel one, I said,
For leaving, for cheating. Now I realize the real cruelty is staying with someone under false pretenses, letting them build dreams on sand you know can't hold them. We're just refusing to stand on it anymore. When the bell came, he snatched it up, threw his card down like he was staking his last claim. As soon as the waiter walked away, he stood. "You'll regret this," he said, not looking at either one of us, "when the dust settles and you're alone." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll know who I am when it does." He walked out, shoulders tight, barely avoiding bumping into my brother, who held the door open with a look that said, "I'm watching you." The restaurant noise swelled back in around us, clinking glasses, muted laughter, as if the universe didn't care that a whole life had just ended at that table. In a way, it hadn't. The only person whose life had just truly imploded was his. Ours were just finally, painfully snapping back into alignment with the truth.
Life didn't magically get better after that restaurant. There was no slow clap from the other diners, no judge appearing out of thin air to bang a gavel and sentence him on the spot. We still had to go home to our separate beds that night, stare at ceilings that suddenly felt too high and too empty, and figure out what came next. But something had shifted for good. The part of me that used to wonder if I was overreacting was gone. He tried, of course, to regain control. The text started that same night. Long paragraphs about how we could have worked it out privately, how I'd humiliated him, how she was just bitter and I was letting her poison me. He sprinkled in just enough sweet to hook the old me. "You're my wife. I chose you. Don't throw this away over one mistake." The difference was, for the first time, I wasn't reading them alone. I'd screenshot and send them to her, and she'd reply with a mirror image. His messages to her with the same phrases, same manipulations, just tweaked names and dates. It became almost comical, the cut and paste of his apologies. It's hard to believe you're the exception when you can see you're the template. Within a week, I'd packed a suitcase and moved into the spare room at my mom's, pride swallowed, but dignity intact. I didn't tell him I was leaving. I just left, sent a photo of the key on the counter and the empty closet where my clothes had been. "I'm done," I texted. "Any further contact goes through my lawyer." He responded with threats, "You'll get nothing, good luck starting over," which my lawyer, bless her, printed and added to my file. We filed for divorce on the grounds of fraud, presenting the overlap in relationships, the evidence of his dual life. She, on her side, filed to modify custody in support, attaching the same evidence to show a pattern of dishonesty and instability. Bigamy in our state turned out to be more of a moral slap on the wrist than a guaranteed criminal case. The DA wasn't rushing to make an example out of him. But judges are human, and when they see a man trying to play husband in two courts, it colors how they view his credibility. My divorce moved quicker than I expected. He fought it first, contested everything, tried to lowball every settlement offer. She don't deserve half, he told the court, as if he'd built our life alone. My lawyer calmly laid out our finances, my sacrifices, the career moves I'd made to support his work trips. In the end, the judge split the marital assets fairly, and I walked away with enough to start over without crawling. Not rich, but not stranded. She had a longer road, a custody evaluation, supervised exchanges while emotions were high, a careful dance to make sure the kids were never used as weapons. But the recordings from that dinner, the dates, the overlapping lies, they all helped paint a picture of a man whose word wasn't as solid as he wanted the court to believe. The judge didn't slam him with every possible penalty, but he did set clear expectations: stable housing, transparent finances, no moving the kids around like luggage between his lives. At work, word got around. You can't have two women show up at a restaurant with a folder full of your double life and expect the story to stay contained. His boss, who'd seen him squirm at that dinner, suddenly had less patience for his work trips. Promotions went to other people. At church, the pastor, who'd happily prayed over our marriage a year ago, called us both, separately, to apologize for the blind spots that had let him shine while she suffered in silence. I didn't go back. I found a different spiritual home, one where my worth wasn't tied to whether I had a man on my arm. She went back for the kids' sake, but sat in the back pew with her head held a little higher. The hardest part wasn't him. Once the spell broke, he was just a man with too many lies and not enough imagination to keep track of them. The hardest part was facing myself. The part of me that saw little inconsistencies and smoothed them over with everyone travels, at least he comes home, you're just traumatized from your parents. I had to forgive that version of me, not for being naive, but for wanting safety so badly she mistook performance for peace. Therapy helped. Saying out loud, I married a man who had another wife, felt like admitting failure at first. Like there was a neon sign over my head flashing gullible. The more I sat in that chair, the more the therapist gently pushed the blame back to where it belonged. She lied. You trusted. That's not a character flaw. That's a human thing. Slowly, the shame loosened its grip. I got my own place again. Smaller than the condo, older appliances, but the keys were my own alone. The first night I slept there, my own phone on the nightstand. The silence at 3 a.m. felt strange and holy. No buzzing from someone else's secrets, just the hum of my refrigerator and my own breathing. I started making small promises to myself and keeping them. I'd call my mom back when I said I would. I'd show up to my therapy appointments even when I felt fine. I'd check my bank account weekly. Not because I didn't trust anyone else, but because I trusted myself to be aware. And maybe the hardest one, I'd never fight another woman for a man again. If another 3 a.m. call ever came, I would hear the tremor in her voice and remember the cafe where two strangers became allies instead of enemies. The other woman and I aren't best friends. Our lives are too different, our history's too tangled, but there's a thread between us now. Every few weeks, we text, court went okay today, Kids liked their new school, got through another holiday. There's comfort in knowing someone out there understands without needing the whole backstory every time. As for him, last I heard, he'd moved to a smaller apartment on the edge of town, reputation dented but not destroyed. Men like him rarely face the kind of punishment the movies promise. His real punishment is smaller and slower. Distant kids who side-eye him when he's late, co-workers who know better than to believe every story, and a mirror that no matter how he tilts it, will always have two women's faces looking back at him saying, "We know." It's not my job to watch his consequences unfold. My job is to live a life where my peace is not dependent on someone else's phone staying quiet, where I listen when my gut whispers, even if it's inconvenient, and where wife is a title I might wear again someday, but never at the cost of losing the woman I was before I took someone's last name. The night his phone rang at 3 a.m., I thought I was hearing the beginning of the end of my marriage. I didn't know it was the beginning of the end of a story I'd been writing since I was 10, that I had to choose between being alone and being lied to. Turned out, there was another option. Being alone, yes, but on my own terms, with my own keys, my own name on the lease, and a sense of self that doesn't fall apart the next time someone else's truth dares to call in the middle of the night.
I used to think the worst thing a man could do to a woman was cheat on her. That if I just avoided the obvious red flags, the late nights, the lipstick stains, the secretive texts, I'd be safe. I'd seen what cheating did to my mother, how it hollowed her out, and I swore my life would be the opposite of hers. I'd have my own money, my own career, my own mind. I would be smart enough to see it coming. That 3 a.m. call taught me something I wish I didn't have to learn. Being smart doesn't make you immune to lies. Loving someone doesn't grant you psychic abilities. And betrayal doesn't always look like perfume on a shirt collar. Sometimes it looks like anniversaries celebrated in 2 different zip codes. 2 women with the same ring on their finger. 2 phones on 2 nightstands that both ring in the dark. We love to believe that if we just pay enough attention, if we don't ignore the signs, we'll never end up the fool. That belief is both comforting and cruel. Comforting because it gives us the illusion of control. Cruel because when the truth finally hits, the first person we blame is ourselves. How did I miss it? What does this say about me? The truth is, it says more about him. About the kind of man who can look you in the eye and say, "You're my one and only," then get in his car and drive to another house to say the same thing to someone else. About the kind of man who builds his whole identity on being a good guy and leans on women's fear of being seen as bitter, crazy, or jealous, so we'll swallow our doubts and smile for the photos. One of the ugliest things I had to face was how quick I was to protect his image, even in my own head. Even with that other woman's voice echoing in my ear, even after putting our timelines next to each other and seeing how they overlapped, there was still a part of me that wanted to find an explanation that made him less awful and made me less wrong. Maybe we were on a break. Maybe he was confused. Maybe I pushed him into a corner and he panicked. Have you ever noticed how easily we hand men excuses they never even have to ask for? How quick we are to frame our own hurt as overreacting just so we don't have to admit our whole life has to change? The turning point for me wasn't the call. It wasn't even the confrontation at the restaurant. It was the moment I stopped needing to be the real wife and started being real with myself. It would have been so easy to sit across from that woman and turn her into my enemy. I could have clung to the paper that said marriage and used it as a weapon. You're just the side chick. You knew he was taken. She could have turned her years with him into proof that my love didn't count. That's the script men like him count on. Two women tearing each other apart while he slips out the back door with his ego bruised, but his options intact. We didn't give him that. We chose something harder. To sit together, compare the stories he'd sold us, and admit we'd both been played. To understand that the only person who owed us loyalty in that triangle was him, and he'd given it to no one. That choice, to form an alliance instead of a rivalry, saved me from a different kind of damage. Not the damage of being lied to, that was done, but the damage of building my healing on top of hating someone who was hurting just like me. There is a particular kind of freedom in realizing you don't have to compete for a man who is using both of you. You can opt out of the game entirely. You can say, keep him, and mean, keep that version of him away from me. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to this to take away, it's this. The other woman is not automatically your enemy. Sometimes she is exactly who you need to talk to in order to see the full picture. That doesn't mean you have to be best friends. It doesn't mean you'll always be able to believe each other. Every situation is different. But if a stranger calls you at 3 a.m. and says, put my husband on the phone, pause before you let your pride answer. Ask whose promise really broke here, his or hers. And ask what would make you safer, clinging to a title or clinging to the truth. I also learned that starting over is not the death sentence people make it out to be. For years, the fear of being alone weighed on me heavier than any red flag. I didn't even realize how much until he threw it in my face in that booth. Where are you going to go? Start over in your 30s? As if my worth evaporated with my 20s. As if being partnered on paper was a bigger win than being at peace in my own skin. Starting over was scary. Leaving that condo to go back to my mother's couch with a suitcase and a file of court documents was humbling in a way I can't sugarcoat. But you know what was worse? The version of me who would have stayed, ears plugged, pretending not to notice when his phone buzzed at odd hours, choosing the illusion of stability over the reality of respect. There is a different kind of security that comes from knowing that the roof over your head, the phone on your nightstand, and the name on your bills all come with one signature, yours. It doesn't mean you don't ever want partnership again. It just means that the next time someone says, we're a team, you know in your bones you can stand on your own if you have to. Finally, I had to make peace with the fact that there is no way to betrayal-proof your life. You can check phones, track locations, memorize passwords like my mother did, and still be blindsided. You can choose to trust and still get hurt. The goal is not to become a detective 24/7. The goal is to build a life internally and externally where if the worst happens, if the phone rings at 3 a.m. and a stranger says, put my husband on the phone, you have enough of yourself intact that your world shakes, but it doesn't shatter you. A life where you have your own support system, your own resources, your own sense of I am that isn't swallowed up by we were. My husband's phone rang at 3 a.m. When I answered, a woman said, put my husband on the phone. That sentence ended my ignorance. It ended my membership in a story I didn't agree to be in. It hurt like hell, but it also started something I didn't see coming. A version of me who doesn't wait until 3 in the morning to listen to herself.